There's a moment in every archaeologist's career when the line between legend and reality begins to blur, when a discovery stops feeling like history and starts feeling like a warning. Picture this: a renowned researcher carefully unwrapping an ancient Egyptian amulet in a dimly lit museum basement, his hands trembling not from excitement, but from something far more primal. Days later, he'd be found dead in his study, the amulet clutched in his stiff fingers, his journal filled with frantic scribbles about voices in the dark. Officials called it a heart attack. Those who knew the artifact's history knew better. This wasn't just some dusty relic, it was one of history's most infamous cursed objects, part of a terrifying tradition that spans civilizations and centuries. From the tombs of pharaohs to the vaults of modern museums, certain artifacts carry more than just historical significance. They bear what can only be described as a supernatural stain. These objects defy explanation, leaving trails of misfortune in their wake. Explorers struck down by sudden illness, collectors plagued by nightmares, entire families crumbling under waves of inexplicable tragedy. And while science scoffs, the patterns are too consistent, the stories too eerily similar to dismiss. Whatever you call it, curse, hex, or cosmic vengeance, one thing is clear: some relics refuse to rest. Today, we're venturing into the shadowy crossroads where archaeology meets the paranormal, unraveling 30 of history's most chilling artifact curses. These aren't just campfire tales. Each case comes with documented victims, bizarre coincidences, and sometimes bone-chilling first-hand accounts. We'll examine the Hope Diamond's trail of ruined lives, the sinister puppets blamed for multiple deaths, and even a sacred Maori carving that seemingly retaliated against those who disrespected it. Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, one thread connects them all: disturbing evidence that some forces, once awakened, cannot be contained. So steel your nerves, we're about to uncover why certain artifacts should have stayed buried. Among all the cursed artifacts in history, few carry a legacy as notorious or as deadly as the Hope Diamond. This deep blue gem, roughly the size of a walnut, has left a trail of devastation stretching back centuries. Its story begins in the mines of Golconda, India, where legend claims it was stolen from the forehead of a Hindu idol. The moment it was pried loose, the curse took hold. The thief who stole it met a gruesome end, torn apart by wild dogs, or so the story goes. But the carnage had only just begun. The diamond found its way into the hands of French merchant Jean-Baptiste Tavernier, who sold it to King Louis XIV. Soon after, Tavernier's fortune collapsed and he died in obscurity, allegedly eaten by wolves. As for Louis, his reign crumbled into financial ruin, and his descendants met even darker fates. Marie Antoinette, who may have worn the diamond before the Revolution, lost her head to the guillotine. The gem vanished during the chaos, resurfacing decades later in England, where banker Henry Philip Hope acquired it and promptly went bankrupt. His family's decline was so steep, their name became forever tied to the curse. The 20th century brought no relief. Socialite Evelyn Walsh McLean wore the diamond as a macabre good luck charm, only to watch her son die in a car crash, her daughter take her own life, and her husband abandon her before sinking into madness. Even those who merely handled the diamond suffered. A jeweler who recut it lost his young son to a car accident. A postal worker tasked with mailing it was crushed by a truck. The pattern was too consistent to ignore. Today, the Hope Diamond sits in the Smithsonian, carefully displayed behind bulletproof glass. Some say the curse ended when it found a public home. Others insist the tragedies just paused. Scientists have even tested the diamond for radiation, wondering if some physical property could explain the string of misfortune, but the truth remains elusive. Is the Hope Diamond cursed, or is it merely a vessel for humanity's darkest superstitions? One thing's certain: after centuries of bloodshed and sorrow, few are willing to test fate by wearing it again. Even as the Hope Diamond settled into its display at the Smithsonian, the whispers of its curse never fully faded. Museum staff reported eerie occurrences, night guards hearing faint whispers near its case when no one else was around, cleaners refusing to dust its display after claiming the diamond watched them. Then came the visitor incidents. One woman, after pressing her hand against the glass, broke her wrist the next day in a freak fall. Another man, who boasted loudly about stealing the gem as a joke, suffered a heart attack in the parking lot hours later. Coincidence, perhaps, but the sheer volume of these stories makes even skeptics hesitate. Scientists have tried to explain the phenomenon. Some speculate the diamond emits trace radiation enough to cause dizziness or nausea in sensitive individuals. Others point to the power of suggestion. If you believe something's cursed, your mind can manufacture symptoms, but neither theory fully explains the historical horrors tied to this stone. The deaths, the financial ruin, the generations of tragedy, they form a pattern too precise to dismiss as random chance. Even the Smithsonian's former gem curator admitted they receive regular letters from people begging them to release the diamond, claiming its energy disturbs them from miles away. Perhaps the most chilling modern account comes from a jeweler hired to inspect the Hope Diamond in the 1990s. After spending hours documenting its facets under bright lights, he began having vivid nightmares of drowning, only to learn later that multiple previous owners had died at sea. He returned the diamond untouched, refusing further work. Whether a curse or some strange quantum memory locked within its crystal structure, one truth remains: the Hope Diamond story is far from over. And those who dare to test its power may find themselves written into its dark legend next. Now, shifting from gems to something far more unsettling: ancient puppets believed to carry their own malevolent will. Unlike the Hope Diamond's passive curse, these artifacts seem to actively retaliate against those who cross them. Deep beneath the earth in China's Shaanxi province lies an army unlike any other, not of flesh and blood but of hardened clay. The Terracotta warriors, standing guard for over 2,000 years, were meant to protect Emperor Qin Shi Huang in the afterlife, but many believe they were also meant to punish anyone who dared disturb his eternal rest. When farmers first uncovered fragments of these statues in 1974, archaeologists marveled at the discovery. What they didn't realize was that they might have awakened something far darker. Local legends warned of a terrible curse placed on the tomb, an ancient vengeance against grave robbers and trespassers. The farmers who initially struck the warriors with their shovels suffered bizarre misfortunes in the following years. One reportedly went blind without explanation. Another's son drowned in the same field where the statues were found, but it wasn't just villagers who paid the price. Several archaeologists working on the excavation died young, their deaths attributed to strange illnesses. One researcher, perfectly healthy at the start of the dig, developed a sudden respiratory condition that slowly suffocated him over months. Others succumbed to unexplained organ failures, their medical reports baffling doctors. Theories about the curse range from the supernatural to the scientific. Some suggest Qin Shi Huang's necropolis was deliberately laced with toxic mercury. Samples from the site showed dangerously high levels, possibly part of an elaborate booby trap. Others point to ancient Chinese texts describing ritual curses placed on imperial tombs, binding spirits to defend them for eternity. Perhaps most chilling are the accounts from overnight security guards at the excavation site, who swear they've heard the sound of marching footsteps when no one else is present, as if the Terracotta Army still patrols its emperor's domain. Modern visitors aren't immune either. Tour guides quietly share stories of cameras malfunctioning near certain statues, or people experiencing waves of nausea when standing too close to particular figures. In 2006, a German tourist attempted to steal a warrior's finger as a souvenir. Within a week, he developed a severe infection in that same finger, requiring emergency amputation. Coincidence, maybe, but given the sheer weight of eerie incidents tied to this site, It's no wonder many researchers now treat Qin Shi Huang's tomb with a mix of reverence and unease. Even the Chinese government has shown caution. The central burial mound believed to contain the emperor's untouched remains has never been excavated, despite immense historical value. Some say its preservation, others whisper its fear, because while the Terracotta Army may be one of archaeology's greatest finds, its silent, watchful presence serves as a reminder. Some secrets aren't meant to be uncovered, and some curses refuse to stay buried. The more researchers uncovered at the Terracotta Army site, the harder it became to ignore the unsettling pattern. Take the case of Lai Chengyuan, a lead archaeologist who spent years meticulously restoring the warriors. In 1985, at just 42 years old, he collapsed during a routine excavation. Doctors diagnosed him with a rare blood disorder that progressed with terrifying speed. His final journal entries described waking up to visions of shadowy figures standing at the foot of his bed. Then there were the laborers. 7 men from the original digging team died before reaching 50, their ailments ranging from sudden organ failure to aggressive cancers with no family history. One widow claimed her husband's last words were an apology to the emperor for disturbing his sleep. Local villagers had warned them. Generations had passed down stories of Qin Shi Huang's necromancers weaving protections into the very soil, curses that would drain the life from those who defiled the tomb. When workers began exhuming the statues, elders reported seeing dark mists coil around the excavation pits at dawn. Scientists dismissed it as morning fog, but the stories gained traction when equipment malfunctioned in ways that defied logic. Drills snapped mid-use, their steel bits crumbling like dry clay. Photography equipment captured blurred faces on otherwise perfectly preserved warriors, as if the statues had turned their heads at the last second. Skeptics point to environmental factors, mercury contamination from the emperor's rumored rivers of liquid metal, or fungal spores released after millennia sealed underground. But that doesn't explain the accounts that defy science altogether. A visiting British historian in 2003 swore a warrior whispered to her in archaic Chinese, an experience followed by months of night terrors so severe she abandoned her research. Then there's the infamous cursed film reel, a documentary cruise footage from 1999 that allegedly shows statues moving when played frame by frame. The footage was locked away after the director suffered a stroke during editing. Whether supernatural vengeance or an ancient security system still active after 2 millennia, the Terracotta Army's warnings are clear. Even now, workers at the site observe strange rituals, never turning their backs on certain statues, refusing to work after sundown, because as one surviving laborer put it, the emperor didn't build an army to be admired. He built it to fight, and some battles don't end just because the world moves on. This same chilling principle applies to another artifact, one not of stone, but of gold and rubies, said to carry a curse so potent it reshaped the fate of empires. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 should have been a triumph, a dazzling window into ancient Egypt's glory. Instead, it became the stuff of nightmares, sparking whispers of a curse so potent it crossed continents. When British archaeologist Howard Carter first peered into the tomb's antechamber, his patron Lord Carnarvon asked if he could see anything. Carter's now famous reply, "Yes, wonderful things," would soon twist into something far darker. Within months, Carnarvon lay dead in a Cairo hotel room, his face frozen in a scream, the cause listed as an infected mosquito bite, but the locals knew better. This was the curse of the Pharaohs in action, a vengeance inscribed on tomb walls. Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king. The carnage didn't stop with Carnarvon. His dog back in England howled once and dropped dead the same hour as its master. A radiologist who X-rayed Tutankhamun's mummy died of a mysterious wasting disease. Carnarvon's half-brother committed suicide shortly after. Even trivial connections proved fatal. A wealthy businessman who merely visited the tomb was found murdered in Manhattan months later. By 1929, 11 people linked to the excavation had died under strange circumstances. Newspapers ran daily tallies, dubbing it Tutankhamun's revenge. Then came the Cairo blackout, a moment so chilling it silenced even the staunchest skeptics. On the night Carter's team pried open the burial chamber, every light in the city flickered and died. Witnesses described an unnatural darkness swallowing streets whole, lasting just long enough to feel intentional. Back in England, Carnarvon's estate was simultaneously ravaged by a power surge that fried electrical systems. Engineers found no technical explanation for either event. Modern scholars offer alternatives: fungal spores in the tomb, toxic preservatives, or even the psychological toll of guilt over colonial plundering. But some details resist logic. Carter's canary, kept as a living gas detector, was eaten by a cobra, the pharaoh's sacred protector, on the day the tomb was unsealed. Workers reported hearing ghostly wails from the burial chamber when no one was inside, and Carter himself, though he lived another 16 years, spent them plagued by misfortune, financial ruin, the death of his closest collaborators, and a final decade in agonizing pain from an undiagnosed illness. Perhaps the most haunting clue lies in Tutankhamun's burial mask. Recent scans revealed a hidden layer beneath the gold, a cheaper, recycled headpiece belonging to someone else, hastily gilded over. Was the boy king's restless spirit angered by the theft of his afterlife, or does the mask itself hold some older, borrowed malice? One thing's certain: a century later, the curse's grip hasn't loosened. In 2005, when the mummy was moved for CT scanning, the equipment failed repeatedly. Technicians swore the outages only happened when the body was present, as if something or someone still refused to be examined. The enduring terror of Tutankhamun's curse isn't just its body count, it's the precision. The way it targets not just thieves, but those who mock it. Carnarvon allegedly joked about the curse weeks before his death, telling reporters he felt the pharaoh's breath on his neck. The radiologist who X-rayed the mummy boasted he'd proven curses weren't real until his fatal diagnosis weeks later. It's a pattern we'll see again and again. Ancient wrath punishing modern arrogance. Because some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed. For every chilling legend, there are those who demand hard evidence, and the Tutankhamun curse is no exception. Modern researchers have spent decades picking apart the so-called mummy's curse, searching for rational explanations behind the string of deaths. One leading theory points to ancient bacteria lurking in the sealed tomb. When Lord Carnarvon nicked his mosquito bite during a shave just weeks after entering the burial chamber, scientists now suspect the wound became infected with strains of pathogenic mold like Aspergillus niger, a common tomb contaminant capable of ravaging the lungs. Others propose toxic gases released after 3,000 years of decomposition interacting with embalming oils might have created a lethal atmosphere in those first crucial hours after unsealing. Yet the most compelling counterargument sits in plain sight. Howard Carter himself, the man who physically broke into Tutankhamun's inner sanctum, handled the artifacts, and even slept inside the tomb, lived another 16 years, hardly the swift retribution promised by the curse. Critics highlight how the media cherry-picked victims while ignoring survivors. Of the 58 people present during the excavation, only 8 died within a decade. Statistically, not unusual for an era before antibiotics. Even Carnarvon's death loses some mystique when you consider he was already chronically ill, his immune system weakened by a near-fatal car crash years earlier. But here's where the debate gets fascinating. While science can explain individual deaths, the eerie clustering of misfortune defies easy dismissal. Why did so many tragedies orbit this single excavation? The radiologist who X-rayed the mummy didn't just die. His equipment mysteriously malfunctioned during the procedure. then he developed a condition doctors couldn't classify. Carnarvon's brother didn't merely commit suicide, he did so shortly after receiving a cryptic warning letter quoting the original curse inscription. Even Carter, despite outliving his team, endured bizarre hardships. His home burned under suspicious circumstances, his closest colleagues died in rapid succession, and his financial backers abruptly withdrew, leaving him destitute. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between superstition and science. Ancient Egyptians did embed real toxins in their tombs. Traces of arsenic and mercury have been found in Tutankhamun's burial goods. Combine that with the power of suggestion, knowing you've violated a curse-laden site, and the mind can weaponize fear. In 2010, microbiologists discovered that certain tomb bacteria actually thrive on human stress hormones, creating a vicious cycle where anxiety makes you more susceptible to infection. So was it supernatural vengeance or a perfect storm of biology and psychology? Maybe both. Because sometimes the dead don't need magic to punish the living, just time and the right conditions to let nature do the work for them. Some curses whisper, others scream. The Delhi Purple Sapphire doesn't bother with subtlety. This deceptively beautiful stone, roughly the size of a pigeon's egg, carries a legacy so dark that even a museum won't display it openly. The story begins in 1857 during India's violent uprising against British rule. A cavalry officer looted the sapphire from the temple of Indra in Kanpur, a shrine dedicated to the Hindu god of war and storm's deities not known for forgiving thieves. Within days of pocketing the gem, the officer's luck turned vicious. Demoted for misconduct, he narrowly survived a grenade blast that killed his entire unit. Broken, he shipped the sapphire home to England as a morbid trophy, only to die months later in a pub brawl over gambling debts. The sapphire's next owner, a British scholar, dismissed the curse as superstition until his wife drowned in their bathtub and his investments collapsed overnight. He gave the stone to his son, who shot himself 6 months later. By the early 20th century, the sapphire had left a trail of wreckage. Businessmen bankrupted, marriages shattered, and at least 3 suicides. Even those who briefly handled it reported nightmares of violet flames and a figure whispering in Sanskrit. The pattern was too consistent to ignore. Then came Edward Heron Allen, a polymath who acquired the sapphire in the 1890s. A man of science, he was a lawyer, biologist, and violin maker. He scoffed at supernatural tales. But within weeks, his health deteriorated mysteriously. His daughter nearly died of sepsis. A friend who borrowed the gem lost her fortune in a shipwreck. Heron Allen tried twice to rid himself of the stone, throwing it into a canal only to have it returned by a dredger, then donating it to a museum where it promptly burned down. Desperate, he locked the sapphire in 7 nested boxes with protective charms and willed it to London's Natural History Museum under strict orders: never open it. For decades, curators obeyed until 1995, when geologist Alan Hart inherited the collection. Ignoring warnings, he unsealed the boxes. His car crashed days later, his marriage imploded, colleagues reported equipment failing when the stone was present. The museum promptly relocked it in storage, where it remains today. Science offers no explanation for the sapphire's malevolence. Tests confirm it's not even a sapphire, just an amethyst of mediocre quality. Yet something about this stone defies reason. Security cameras near its cabinet malfunction. Night staff report cold spots in its vicinity. And in 2007, when a documentary crew insisted on filming it, their footage revealed a shadowy humanoid shape hovering near the case, visible only in infrared. Perhaps the curse was never about the stone itself, but the sacrilege of its theft. Or maybe, as Heron Allen wrote before sealing it away, some objects are simply accursed and stained with blood. Either way, the museum's stance is clear. This is one artifact that will never see daylight again. Because while science can analyze a gem's chemical makeup, some mysteries, like the true price of disturbing the divine, resist quantification. From cursed gems, we turn to something even more unsettling. Dolls believed to move on their own, their glass eyes tracking the living with eerie precision. Unlike the sapphire's passive malice, these artifacts seem to harbor active, watchful intelligence, and they don't appreciate being ignored. The Hodgson family never stood a chance. When financier Charles Hodgson acquired the Delhi Purple Sapphire in 1876, he saw only an exotic investment, not the makeshift coffin for his family's future it would become. Within months of displaying the gem in his London study, Hodgson's eldest son contracted typhoid despite no outbreak in the area. Doctors called it random tragedy. The servants whispered otherwise. They'd seen the sapphire glow faintly violet the night before the fever struck. Charles dismissed the talk until his shipping empire collapsed like dominoes. Ships sank in calm seas, cargo manifests vanished, creditors circled. By 1880, he was selling furniture to feed his remaining children. Then came the fire, a blaze that inexplicably spared everything except the bedroom where his daughter slept. Her body found clutching a melted lump later identified as the sapphire's setting. The stone itself sat untouched on the mantel downstairs, glinting as firefighters hosed the ruins. Charles's surviving brother, a clergyman, took custody of the gem next, intending to donate it to his church's collection. His sermons soon took a dark turn, filled with apocalyptic visions. Parishioners found him one morning in the vestry, scratching the Lord's Prayer backward into the wood floor with his fingernails, the sapphire placed precisely where the altar's cross should have been. Committed to an asylum, he spent his final years screaming about the violet eye watching him from the walls. The sapphire's next victim was Charles's niece, Elena, who inherited it in 1892. A rationalist like her uncle, she wore the stone to society balls as a morbid conversation piece until the dreams started. Night after night, she described a figure with Indra's iconography standing at the foot of her bed, dripping seawater onto the carpet. Then her fiancé vanished during a Cambridge rowing trip, his boat found empty but for a single purple-tinged handprint on the stern. When Elena herself died at 27 from a botched tonsillectomy, a procedure so routine her doctor called the infection statistically impossible, her will demanded the sapphire be sealed in lead. Yet the curse wasn't finished. In 1905, Elena's cousin broke open the casing, believing the stories were hysterical folklore. He lasted 3 months before throwing himself under a train, his suicide note citing the whispers in the stone. The final Hodgson to possess it, elderly widow Margaret, tried returning the gem to India in 1921. Her steamer ship ran aground off Mumbai, not on rocks but on a sandbar that hadn't existed the previous tide charts. The sapphire rolled from her luggage into the surf, only to reappear weeks later in her London kitchen, resting dry atop the flour bin. She died that winter when her furnace failed, on the warmest February night in recorded history. Modern parapsychologists who have studied the sapphire's history note an unsettling pattern. Unlike other cursed objects that strike indiscriminately, this one seems to escalate its retaliation with each generation. The Hodgsons didn't just suffer misfortune, they endured horrors tailored to their greatest vulnerabilities. The shipping magnate lost his fleet, the clergyman was tormented by sacrilege. The bridegroom disappeared on water after his fiancée dreamed of drowning. It's as if the stone doesn't just curse, it studies, learns, adapts. Perhaps that's why London's Natural History Museum keeps it triple locked in a vibration-proof safe, accessible only with trustee approval. Because while science can't prove curses exist, the Hodgson family's tragedy offers a warning. Some objects carry history's fingerprints, and not all of them are human. The mines of Andamuka have yielded countless opals, but only one carried a curse potent enough to unsettle even royalty. In 1954, Australian miners presented Queen Elizabeth II with a dazzling specimen, the Andamuka opal, a stone the size of a child's palm, shimmering with blues and greens like trapped ocean light. What should have been a proud moment quickly soured. The miner who first chiseled it from the earth broke his leg in 3 places the next day. Another worker involved in its polishing lost his home to a freak bushfire. By the time the opal reached the Queen's hands, whispers of its malice had already begun. Indigenous Australian elders weren't surprised. For millennia, their Dreamtime stories warned that opals were fragments of the rainbow serpent's anger, beautiful but volatile. Some tribes believed the stones absorbed the suffering of the land, especially when taken without permission. The Andamooka region's traditional owners, the Kakatha people, spoke of a sacred cave where opals formed as tears of ancestral spirits. Disturbing them, they said, invited Mamu evil spirits that clung like red desert dust. The Queen's opal seemed determined to prove these legends right. During a state banquet where she wore it, an attendant tripped and shattered a priceless vase. Her photographer that day later fell down a flight of stairs, breaking his camera lens in an identical pattern to the opal's fractures. Most chilling was the fate of the mining company's owner. Months after the gifting ceremony, he boarded a flight to Adelaide that narrowly avoided crashing when both engines failed midair, an incident investigators called statistically impossible. He sold his stake in Andamooka soon after, telling colleagues he'd had enough of tempting fate. Even science struggles to explain the pattern. Geologists note that Andamooka opals form under extreme pressure, creating internal stresses that can make them prone to cracking. But that doesn't account for the human toll. In 2003, a journalist researching the curse tracked down retired miners involved in the original extraction. Of the 7 he located, 5 had suffered bizarre accidents. One man lost vision in his right eye the same day he handled the opal, though doctors found no physical cause. Today, the stone resides in a velvet-lined vault at Buckingham Palace, rarely displayed. Courtiers insist it's for preservation, but palace staff tell a different story. They claim the opal once vanished from its case overnight, only to reappear hours later resting atop the Queen's desk beside a handwritten note that read, in part, "Some gifts are not given but borrowed." The handwriting matched no one on staff. Whether cursed or merely coincidental, the Andamooka opal's legacy lingers. Modern miners in the region still avoid stones with its distinctive, eye-like patterning, leaving them buried where the rainbow serpent left them. Because as one Kakatha elder put it, not all beauty is meant to be owned. Some things shine brightest where they fall. This same respect for the unseen threads binding objects to their origins echoes halfway across the world, in the jungles of Mexico, where a jade mask said to house a vengeful goddess waits. The British royal family has long navigated superstitions with pragmatic caution, but the Andamooka opal's presence in their collection raises quiet questions. While no palace records officially acknowledge the stone's alleged curse, insiders note a pattern of peculiar incidents tied to its arrival. The Queen's private secretary reportedly developed chronic migraines after handling the opal for cataloguing, headaches that mysteriously ceased when reassigned to other duties. In 1962, during a state visit where the opal was displayed, a chandelier in Buckingham Palace's blue drawing room crashed onto the exact spot where the gem had rested hours earlier. Staff referred to it afterward as the opal's shadow. Other royal opals carry similar whispers. The renowned Fire of Australia, a 700-carat gem gifted to Queen Mary in 1954, was almost immediately followed by the sudden death of her son, Prince George, the Duke of Kent, in a wartime plane crash. Though unrelated to the Andamooka stone, the timing fueled whispers among palace staff about a broader opal jinx. Even Queen Victoria allegedly avoided the stones after her beloved Prince Albert's death, despite previously adoring their kaleidoscopic hues. Court journals from her later years reveal she ordered all opals removed from her sight, calling them mourning stones. Beyond royalty, history brims with opals blamed for misfortune. The Pandora opal, mined in Hungary in 1828, was said to have blinded its cutter when a flake flew into his eye. Its subsequent owners, including a Parisian actress and a Bavarian baron, all met violent ends. Then there's the Dragon's Eye, a black opal from Lightning Ridge that allegedly caused a Sydney banker to hallucinate snakes before he leaped from his office window in 1937. The common thread: these weren't just tragedies, they mirrored each stone's unique character. The Andamukha opal's victims often drowned or encountered water-related disasters, while fire opals like the Flame Queen were tied to burns and blazes. Perhaps most telling is how modern royals treat the Andamukha stone. Unlike other crown jewels regularly displayed, it's been seen publicly only twice in 50 years. When Kate Middleton chose her wedding tiara in 2011, palace archivists confirmed she explicitly rejected designs incorporating opals despite their aesthetic appeal. And when Princess Eugenie wore an opal ring for her 2018 wedding, commentators noted it was synthetic, a detail rarely emphasized for other gems. Whether by instinct or inherited wisdom, the Windsors seem to respect what miners and mystics have long known. Opals demand careful handling. Their beauty may be geological, but their legends are carved deeper in the collective memory of those who have learned, sometimes brutally, that not all treasures are meant to be kept. As one Australian elder summarized, the land takes back what's hers, sometimes gently, sometimes not. This dance between reverence and retribution reaches its peak with an artifact far older than any gem, a 3,000-year-old Mesopotamian cylinder seal said to summon storms when touched. In the world of cursed artifacts, few objects have a paper trail as disturbingly modern or as well documented as the Dybbuk box. What appears to be a simple antique wine cabinet, its wood darkened with age and its hinges creaking ominously, became the centerpiece of a paranormal storm in the early 2000s. Its story begins not in some ancient tomb, but on eBay, where a 37-year-old furniture restorer named Kevin Mannies listed it in 2003 with an unusual disclaimer. "I'm selling this for my grandmother, a Holocaust survivor who got it from Poland." Every owner has met with bad luck. The listing might have been dismissed as a sales gimmick, if not for what happened next. Mannies himself had been the first to experience the box's malice. After purchasing it at an estate sale, he began suffering violent night terrors so vivid he woke with scratches. His mother suffered a stroke hours after he gifted her the box. His employees quit en masse, reporting the scent of burning hair and the sound of whispers emanating from the cabinet even when empty. Desperate, Mannies sold it to a Missouri student named Iosif Nietsk, who lasted barely a week before emailing him in panic, "There's a dead woman in my house. She stands at the foot of my bed demanding I return what's hers." Medical students renting Nietsk's attic later claimed their stethoscopes picked up a second, rasping heartbeat inside the box's walls. The next owner, Jason Haxton, director of a medical museum, thought himself immune to superstition. He was wrong. Within days of acquiring the box, his health collapsed, ulcers, hives, and a persistent cough that left him bedridden. His wife dreamed of an old woman with hollow eyes clawing at her throat. Then came the poltergeist activity, doors slamming, lights flickering, and an unnerving pattern of 3 knocks echoing through their home at 3:33 a.m. Haxton consulted rabbis who identified the entity as a Dybbuk, a restless Jewish spirit bound to the box, possibly the soul of a woman wronged in life. After failed attempts to cleanse it with salt and prayer, he donated it to the Zach Bagans Haunted Museum in Las Vegas, where it remains sealed behind glass. What makes the Dybbuk box uniquely terrifying isn't just its effects, it's how stubbornly it defies skepticism. Paranormal investigator Sam Garra, hired to document the box for a television special, developed third-degree burns on his hands after touching it, though the wood was room temperature. Infrared cameras captured fleeting thermal spikes near its lock. Even more chilling are the reports from museum visitors who merely stand near its display, nosebleeds, panic attacks, and one woman who swore the box's shadow moved separately from the lights. Is the Dybbuk box truly haunted, or is it a masterclass in mass hysteria? The rabbinical seal once affixed to its interior suggests someone, centuries ago, believed it contained something dangerous. And while science can't prove supernatural claims, the consistency of the horrors across unrelated owners is hard to dismiss. Perhaps the most telling detail comes from Manny's original listing. Inside the box, beneath a dried rose and a cracked goblet, lay a scrap of paper with Hebrew letters spelling, "Help me." Whoever or whatever first wrote that plea might still be waiting for an answer. From locked cabinets to sealed tombs, our next artifact takes us deep into the Arizona desert, where a simple miner's pickaxe is said to have unleashed something far older and far hungrier than anyone expected. The Dybbuk box didn't just unsettle its owners, it became a magnet for paranormal investigators determined to crack its mysteries. When the box landed at Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum, it attracted teams armed with electromagnetic field detectors, thermal cameras, and audio recorders, all hoping to catch the Dybbuk in action. What they captured defied easy explanation. During a 2016 investigation, a team from the Atlantic Paranormal Society recorded electronic voice phenomena, a raspy whisper in archaic Hebrew that linguists identified as a plea for burial rites. The voice emerged despite no living person in the room speaking the language. Another team's thermal imaging showed a cold spot moving against airflow, lingering near the box before vanishing, a phenomenon physicist Dr. Barry Taff called thermodynamically improbable. Skeptics launched their own tests only to encounter bizarre setbacks. Mythbuster Adam Savage, initially dismissive of the curse, agreed to examine the box under controlled conditions. His equipment malfunctioned repeatedly, a brand new audio recorder produced only static, and his infrared camera's battery drained within minutes despite being fully charged. Most unsettling was Savage's own journal entry after the session. Felt something inhale near my ear when no one was behind me. Even hardened debunkers noted oddities they couldn't rationalize. Then came the incident that shook both believers and skeptics alike. During a live-streamed seance in 2019, medium Carla Barron attempted to communicate with the box's spirit. As she recited a Hebrew prayer, viewers reported their screens flickering simultaneously across multiple time zones. A glitch technicians later admitted had no clear source. Barron herself collapsed mid-reading, later describing an overwhelming sensation of being dragged downward. Medical tests revealed no cause, but her vocal cords displayed temporary damage consistent with, as one ENT specialist put it, someone who'd been screaming for hours. Perhaps most chilling are the accounts from museum security guards. Night shift workers report hearing the box's latch click open and shut at random, though inspections confirm it remains sealed. Motion sensors trigger in its display room when no movement is visible on cameras. One guard resigned after documenting shadow figures near the case that appeared only in time-lapse photos, their postures suggesting they were leaning in to examine the box themselves. Science offers few explanations for these phenomena. Materials analysis shows the box is just an early 20th century wine cabinet, no hidden mechanisms or toxic residues. Yet the consistency of the experiences across dozens of unrelated witnesses suggests something beyond mass hysteria. As paranormal researcher Greg Newkirk noted, when skeptics walk away unnerved and equipment fails in repeatable patterns, you're either dealing with the world's most elaborate hoax or something science hasn't caught up to yet. The Dybbuk box remains one of the most intensely studied and feared objects in paranormal history. It challenges the line between legend and evidence, leaving us with an unsettling question. If this curse is real, what does that mean for all the other artifacts whispering in the dark? Because sometimes the most terrifying discoveries aren't about proving the supernatural, they're about realizing how many mysteries we still can't explain. The Black Prince's ruby isn't a ruby at all, but its deception runs deeper than gemology. This blood-red spinel, set prominently in Britain's imperial state crown, carries a history soaked in violence that spans 6 centuries. Named for Edward of Woodstock, the Black Prince, its curse seems to thrive on the very thing it symbolizes: power seized at terrible cost. The gem first appears in historical records in the 1400s, though legend claims it originated in the mines of Badakhshan, ripped from the earth alongside rubies destined for Timur the Lame's plundered treasures. Its journey to Europe reads like a chronicle of suffering. The stone's first documented victim was Abu Said, a Moorish prince of Granada. In 1367, he offered the gem as tribute to Pedro the Cruel of Castile to broker peace. Instead, Pedro had him stabbed to death in a tent during negotiations, pocketing the jewel. The Black Prince later received it as payment for aiding Pedro in battle, only to watch his own health crumble into debilitating illness. His namesake gem seemed to mirror his fate: beautiful, coveted, and ultimately destructive. Then came the 100 Years' War, where the ruby's presence on the battlefield became almost prophetic. Henry V wore it in his helmet at Agincourt in 1415, a battle that turned the tide against France, but at a gruesome price. Though victorious, Henry's forces were ravaged by dysentery, and he himself died just 7 years later, covered in festering sores. The ruby passed to his infant son, Henry VI, whose reign collapsed into mental instability and civil war. By the time the gem entered the Tudor treasury, its reputation was sealed. Kings who wore it won wars, but at the cost of their souls. Even when not worn, the stone's influence seemed to linger. During the English Civil War, Oliver Cromwell ordered the crown jewels dismantled and sold. Yet the Black Prince's ruby mysteriously vanished, only to reappear after the monarchy's restoration. Some whisper it was hidden by royalists who feared its curse would taint the Commonwealth. Others allege Cromwell's men tried to sell it, only to have buyers perish under bizarre circumstances, like the Dutch merchant who drowned in a canal the day after purchasing it. Modern scrutiny hasn't dulled the gem's eerie legacy. In 1937, when the crown was reset for George VI's coronation, workers reported tools slipping at odd angles when handling the ruby, as if repelled. During Elizabeth II's reign, a photographer capturing the crown jewels claimed his lens cracked while focusing on the stone, a fracture that mirrored the gem's natural flaw. Even today, Tower of London guards share stories about ravens avoiding the jewel house when the ruby is on display, as if sensing something human eyes can't see. What makes this curse so unnerving isn't just its body count, it's the pattern. The Black Prince's ruby doesn't strike randomly, it targets ambition. Every ruler who wielded it gained temporary victory, only to lose something far dearer: health, sanity, or legacy. Perhaps that's why the current monarchy rarely wears it outside coronations, opting instead to let it glitter behind glass. Because some gems aren't meant to be carried, only observed from a safe distance, as a reminder that history's treasures often come with hidden invoices written in blood. From regal gemstones to sacred relics, our next artifact carries a different kind of weight: a mummified hand said to point the way to cursed treasure, while dragging its finders into an early grave. The crown jewels of England may glitter with regal splendor, but the Black Prince's ruby harbors shadows that stretch far beyond its crimson glow. While history remembers Charles I as the only English monarch executed for treason, few note the chilling detail of his final hours. The king insisted on wearing the ruby during his trial, as if daring fate to intervene. It didn't. His beheading in 1649 was so poorly handled it took 2 strikes of the axe, a grim echo of the gem's fractured past. Even in death, the stone refused release. When Cromwell's men melted down the crown, the ruby vanished, only to resurface decades later, restored to the monarchy alongside rumors it had been smuggled out in the dead of night by a royalist who later went mad. The Victorian era brought no respite. Queen Victoria's beloved Prince Albert died suddenly at 42, just years after the ruby was reset into her new imperial crown. Court physicians cited typhoid, but whispered debates lingered, especially when their grandson, Prince Albert Victor, died equally young under mysterious circumstances. The prince's involvement in the Cleveland Street scandal, followed by his abrupt demise from influenza during a pandemic that spared the rest of the royal household, fueled theories of supernatural retribution. Even the stone's physical flaw, a crack filled with red foil to enhance its luster, seemed symbolic. A monarchy forever patching over wounds the ruby helped inflict. Then came the 20th century's most devastating royal tragedy. Princess Diana's connection to the gem was indirect. She never wore it, but its presence in the coronation regalia of her former father-in-law, King Charles III, sparked macabre speculation after her death. Conspiracy theorists noted the ruby had been displayed weeks earlier at an exhibition Diana reportedly visited, though palace records dispute this. More compelling is the uncanny parallel between her fatal car crash and the demise of the ruby's first known victim. Abu said both died in confined spaces after tangled dealings with powerful men. Modern jewelers handling the stone report bizarre anomalies. During Elizabeth II's coronation in 1953, a BBC engineer claimed his camera malfunctioned each time it focused on the ruby, distorting the broadcast. In 2012, during cleaning ahead of the Diamond Jubilee, a conservator documented a temperature drop of 15 degrees around the gem's display case, unexplained by HVAC systems. Even the Tower of London's ravens, mythically bound to protect the crown, exhibit strange behavior when the ruby is present, clustering on the opposite side of the Green Tower until it's returned to the vault. What makes this curse so unsettling isn't just its longevity, it's the selectivity. The ruby doesn't attack indiscriminately, it mirrors the sins of those who wield it. Abu Said's betrayal, Charles I's arrogance, even Diana's tragedy, whether coincidence or curse, reflects the gem's ancient pattern, dazzling those who covet it, then hollowing them out. The British monarchy, ever pragmatic, seems to sense this. Today, the stone sits encased in bulletproof glass, its crimson glint a warning as much as a wonder, a reminder that some treasures are best admired from afar, lest their weight become more than any crown can bear. Moving from blood-stained jewels to something far more visceral, our next artifact isn't adorned with gold or gems. It's a simple miner's hand, mummified by time, said to clutch secrets no living person should uncover. The mirror in the Myrtles plantation doesn't just reflect the living, it remembers the dead. Tucked away in Louisiana's most infamous haunted house, this antique oval mirror hangs in the foyer, its mercury glass surface darkened by time and something far more unsettling. According to local law, the mirror originally belonged to Sarah Woodruff, wife of plantation owner Clark Woodruff, who met a grim end in the 1820s after being poisoned by an enslaved woman named Chloe. But Sarah's spirit, they say, never left the glass. Visitors who dare to glance into its depths report more than their own faces staring back. Shadowy figures drift into frame behind them, their features twisted in silent agony. Some see a woman in 19th century dress, her hands clawing at the glass as if trapped. Others describe a child's pale face blinking slowly before vanishing. The deaths tied to this mirror stretch far beyond Sarah's era. In the 1970s, a restorer working on the glass collapsed mid-polish, his body discovered hours later with no discernible cause of death. His journal, recovered from his toolbox, contained a single underlined entry. She whispers through the cracks. Then there was the paranormal investigator in 2008 who set up infrared cameras to document the mirror's activity, only to capture his own reflection mouthing words he never spoke before the footage corrupted entirely. Even the plantation staff refused to clean the glass after dark, citing an overwhelming sense of being watched, followed by waves of nausea if they linger too long. But the most chilling accounts come from overnight guests. One woman swore she saw her reflection age decades in real time, her skin withering before her eyes. A honeymooning couple awoke to the sound of shattering glass, only to find the mirror intact, but their wedding photo on the dresser beneath it had cracked cleanly down the middle. Then there's the recurring testimony from those who have glimpsed the mirror's surface in peripheral vision. A distorted figure standing just behind them, its hands outstretched as if poised to push. Turn around and the room is empty. Look back and the reflection is yours alone until it isn't. Scientists who have examined the mirror found nothing unusual in its construction, just 19th century glass with typical silvering degradation. Yet electromagnetic readings spike erratically near its frame, and thermal scans reveal cold spots that drift like fingertips across its surface. Historians note that the Myrtles was built over Native American burial grounds, a detail that might explain why some visitors report seeing figures in the mirror wearing entirely different period clothing, as if the glass doesn't just hold Sarah's spirit, but layers of tragedies stretching back centuries. Whether cursed or merely a focal point for the plantation's accumulated sorrow, the mirror's power lies in its persistence. After every attempted cleansing, every rational explanation, the stories return. The faces reappear because some reflections once altered never go back to normal, and some doors, even those made of glass, should never be opened. Turning from haunted mirrors to something far older, we encounter an artifact not of polished silver but of weathered stone, the Scottish Clach Noban, a ceremonial rock said to scream when touched by the unworthy. Modern paranormal investigators have turned the Myrtles plantation mirror into one of the most scrutinized haunted objects in America. During a 2016 investigation led by the Atlantic Paranormal Society, audio recorders picked up a faint female voice whispering, "Let me out," in the mirror's vicinity, a phrase that didn't appear on any other floor of the house. Thermal imaging captured a hand-shaped heat signature on the glass's surface despite the room's stable temperature, lingering for 13 seconds before vanishing. But the real shock came during playback. While the team reviewed footage later, a second voice, this one distinctly male, could be heard growling "too late" beneath their conversation, though no one recalled hearing it live. Tech-savvy ghost hunters have documented even stranger anomalies. In 2019, a team using laser grid projectors noticed distortions in the light patterns reflected by the mirror, as if something invisible was standing between the projector and the glass. Their full-spectrum camera recorded a brief but unmistakable flicker of movement within the mirror itself, a shadow that didn't correspond to anything in the room. Most unsettling was the electromagnetic field detector, which spiked erratically near the mirror before suddenly flatlining, as if drained of power. When investigators replaced the batteries, the device died again within minutes. Documentary crews haven't fared better. A 2021 Travel Channel shoot was abandoned after multiple crew members experienced temporary blindness when looking directly at the mirror under bright lights. Medical exams revealed no physical cause, but the camera operator's notes described a burning sensation behind his eyes that matched historical accounts of Sarah Woodruff's poisoning symptoms. Then there's the infamous breath test, a common paranormal investigation technique where participants exhale toward cold spots to make ghostly vapor visible. Every attempt near the mirror produces the same result. Visible breath clouds form in perfect rectangles, as if trapped behind panes of invisible glass. Even skeptics leave unnerved. A materials scientist who examined the mirror in 2018 expected to debunk its legends. Instead, he discovered microscopic fractures in the glass that defy conventional aging patterns, lines radiating outward from a central point like a spiderweb, a phenomenon typically seen only in violently shattered glass. His ground-penetrating radar also detected an anomaly beneath the foyer floor, a hollow space containing unidentified metal objects directly beneath the mirror's hanging spot. The plantation's historical society has refused excavation requests, leaving one pressing question unanswered. Is the mirror a conduit for spirits, or is it reflecting something buried beneath it? Recent visitors report an escalating pattern. Where past encounters involved fleeting shadows, today's witnesses describe prolonged interactions. A tourist's reflection mouthing words she didn't speak for 17 consecutive seconds in 2022, captured clearly on her smartphone. Others swear the glass now occasionally reflects the room not as it is, but as it was, antique furnishings materializing in the reflection while the actual space remains modernized. The most chilling account comes from a paranormal researcher who spent 3 nights documenting the mirror. His final journal entry reads, "It's learning how to reach through." The next morning, staff found the mirror slightly ajar in its frame, something that requires unscrewing 4 bolts from the back. All tools were accounted for. All bolts were gone. Buried in a field near the Roman ruins of Delhi Park lies a ring that may have inspired one of literature's darkest legends, the Ring of Sylvanus. This unassuming gold band, discovered in a farmer's field in 1785, carries an inscription that chills the blood: "Sinicinus, may you rot in hell." The words are more than ancient graffiti. They're a curse hurled across centuries by a wronged Roman nobleman whose prized possession was stolen. But the story doesn't end in antiquity. Centuries later, this very ring landed on the desk of a certain Oxford professor, J.R.R. Tolkien, igniting the spark that would become Middle-earth's most iconic artifact, the One Ring. The ring's history reads like a palimpsest of vengeance. Sylvanus, likely a Romano-British official, believed his stolen ring had fallen into the hands of a thief named Sinicinus. In desperation, he visited the Temple of Nodens, a Celtic god associated with healing and, ominously, the sea's destructive power, to commission a cursed tablet. Archaeologists found this lead tablet nearby, its words echoing the ring's inscription, begging the gods to deny Sinicinus peace until he brings the ring back to the temple. What happened next is lost to time, but the ring's rediscovery centuries later suggests one grim possibility: Sinicinus never returned it. Fast forward to 1929, when archaeologist Sir Mortimer Wheeler uncovered the cursed tablet at Delhi Park. Intrigued, he consulted Tolkien, then a specialist in Anglo-Saxon mythology. The parallels are uncanny. Like Sylvanus's ring, Tolkien's One Ring is a gold band inscribed with a malevolent message. Both bestow misfortune on their bearers. Both are tied to a dark Lord Sauron in Middle-earth, Nodens in the real-world mythos. Even the geography aligns. Tolkien's dead marshes eerily mirror the fog-drenched wetlands surrounding Delhi Park. But the ring's modern legacy is just as unsettling. After its discovery, it passed through various collectors, each reporting strange occurrences. One owner claimed the ring would grow inexplicably cold at night, its inscription seeming to darken as if stained. Another alleged his dog refused to enter the room where it was displayed, whining at the threshold. When the ring was finally donated to the Vine Museum in Hampshire, staff noted an odd pattern. Visitors who mocked the curse often suffered minor accidents on their way home, from sprained ankles to shattered phone screens. Coincidence, perhaps, but the museum now displays it with a warning label, a rare acknowledgement of its lingering reputation. What makes the Ring of Sylvanus so compelling isn't just its literary connection. It's the tangible thread it weaves between ancient malice and modern imagination. Tolkien himself never confirmed the link, but his notes reveal a fascination with cursed objects and doom-laden inscriptions. Whether direct inspiration or eerie synchronicity, the ring embodies a truth older than myth. Some words, once cast into the world, refuse to be taken back. And some curses, whether carved in lead or whispered in legend, outlast even the gods who first heard them. Shifting from cursed metals to something far more visceral, a Maori warrior's spear, said to carry not just the weight of battle but the restless fury of those it killed. The connection between Tolkien's One Ring and the cursed artifact of Sylvanus runs deeper than mere coincidence. As a scholar steeped in Anglo-Saxon and Norse mythology, Tolkien would have recognized the chilling resonance of ancient cursed tablets, objects believed to channel supernatural vengeance. The Ring of Sylvianus, with its damning inscription, embodies a timeless fear that words once given physical form can wield power beyond their parchment or metal. Tolkien's notes reveal he studied the Lydney Park excavations closely, even contributing to the site's archaeological report. The parallels are striking. Both rings are gold, both bear inscriptions that promise doom, and both seem to twist fate around their bearers like a noose. But Tolkien's genius lay in how he transformed historical malice into mythic inevitability. Where Sylvianus's curse targeted a single thief, the One Ring corrupts all who possess it, a reflection of Tolkien's wartime disillusionment with power's corrosive nature. The Ring's journey from archaeological curiosity to literary iconography speaks to a darker truth: curses evolve. The Roman nobleman's plea for vengeance became, in Tolkien's hands, a warning about the seduction of dominion. Even the phrasing echoes Sylvianus's "May you rot in hell" finds its mirror in the Black Speeches, "One ring to rule them all," both oaths that transcend their original context to haunt the living. The Ring's modern history only deepens the mystery. After resurfacing in the 18th century, it passed through collectors who reported eerie phenomena. One described dreams of a shadowy figure demanding its return, an experience eerily reminiscent of Gollum's obsession. Another found the ring inexplicably warm to the touch, as if something inside stirred. Tolkien, ever the linguist, might have appreciated the irony. The Latin curse, once meant to punish a thief, now draws tourists to the Vine Museum, where visitors instinctively avoid touching the glass case. The ring's malevolence has softened into superstition, but its legacy endures proof that some stories, like curses, refuse to stay buried. Perhaps most telling is how Tolkien diverged from the source. Sylvianus's ring seeks justice, however brutal. The One Ring offers only addiction and ruin. In that shift, Tolkien exposed humanity's oldest fear, that the true curse isn't the malice of others, but the darkness we invite when we grasp for power. The Vine's display may call it a Roman artifact, but its whisper is universal, a warning etched not just in gold, but in the very fabric of our myths. From inscribed bands to something far more visceral, our next artifact carries not words, but the weight of a warrior's wrath, a Maori Teaha spear said to thirst for blood long after its owner's death. Among all cursed artifacts, few have spread as widely or as inexplicably as the mass-produced painting known as the Crying Boy. This haunting image of a tearful child, reproduced countless times throughout the 20th century, became the center of a modern urban legend when firefighters across England began reporting an impossible pattern. Wherever a house burned to the ground, this cheap print would often be found eerily intact among the ashes. The phenomenon sparked a nationwide panic in the 1980s, with newspapers dubbing it the cursed painting that fire won't touch. But behind the sensational headlines lies a story far stranger than fiction, one that intertwines tragedy, artistic fury, and a series of coincidences so precise they defy logic. The origins of the Crying Boy trace back to Spanish painter Giovanni Bragolin, who specialized in sentimental portraits of orphaned or impoverished children during the 1950s. According to rumor, Bragolin became obsessed with a particular subject, a young boy whose parents had died in a fire. The artist allegedly painted him repeatedly, capturing his sorrow in exaggerated, almost eerie detail. But when the child himself perished in another blaze, a grief-stricken Bragolin supposedly cursed his own work, vowing that any home displaying the painting would meet the same fate. Whether fact or fabrication, the legend took on a life of its own when firefighters began documenting cases where the painting survived fires that reduced everything else to cinders. One of the earliest documented cases occurred in Rotherham in 1985, when a firefighter named Peter Hall discovered the Crying Boy perfectly preserved beneath charred debris, its glass frame unbroken despite the surrounding devastation. Soon, other crews came forward with similar stories, a pattern so consistent that the South Yorkshire Fire Service officially investigated the phenomenon. Their findings were unsettling. Over 50 house fires had featured the inexplicable survival of this same painting. Theories ranged from the mundane, the painting's hardboard backing and varnish coating might resist heat, to the supernatural. Some firefighters refused to touch recovered copies, citing an unnerving feeling of being watched. Others reported strange misfortunes after handling them, from car accidents to sudden illnesses. The hysteria reached its peak when British tabloids launched a campaign urging readers to destroy their copies. Thousands mailed the paintings to newspapers or burned them in public bonfires, only for new reports to emerge of fires breaking out near the disposal sites. Skeptics pointed out that the painting's popularity meant it was statistically likely to appear in some fire-damaged homes, and its materials might indeed resist combustion. But even the most rational explanations couldn't account for the visceral reactions it provoked. Families described an oppressive atmosphere in rooms where the painting hung, with pets reportedly growling or avoiding the area entirely. One woman claimed her copy's eyes would follow her, the boy's expression shifting from sorrow to something closer to accusation. Perhaps the most chilling detail lies in the painting's composition. Art conservators note that the boy's tear-streaked face is rendered with an unnatural intensity, the shadows too deep, the highlights too stark, creating the illusion that his gaze pierces through the viewer. Combined with the fire-resistant materials, this visual trick might explain why so many projected supernatural qualities onto it. But Bragelin's own fate adds a macabre footnote. After producing dozens of these portraits, he abandoned painting altogether, reportedly tormented by nightmares of burning children. His later years were spent in obscurity, his once lucrative career reduced to whispers and speculation. Today, the crying boy remains a cultural oddity, a supposedly cursed object that was never rare or valuable, yet somehow permeated the collective imagination. Surviving copies still surface in thrift stores and estate sales, often with layers of yellowed newspaper clippings about the curse tucked behind the frame. Whether the work of a grieving artist's malice or a perfect storm of coincidence and psychology, its legacy endures as a warning. Sometimes the most dangerous artifacts aren't ancient relics locked in museums, but the seemingly innocent objects we invite into our homes. Because fire may cleanse, but some stains, whether of grief, guilt, or something older, never truly fade. Our next artifact carries a different kind of heat, a bronze statue from India that doesn't just watch its victims, but literally burns those who dare to touch it. The media frenzy surrounding the crying boy reached a fever pitch in late 1985, when British tabloids turned the painting into a full-blown national obsession. The Sun newspaper launched a front-page campaign urging readers to mail in their cursed copies, offering to destroy them in a massive public bonfire. Thousands responded, flooding newsrooms with the tearful portraits, some wrapped in cloth, others scrawled with protective symbols or pleas for forgiveness. The paper's stunt culminated in a spectacle dubbed the burning of the bairns, where stacks of paintings were set alight in a Leeds field under the watchful lenses of television cameras. But instead of laying the curse to rest, the event only deepened the mystery. Firefighters reported the flames behaved erratically, twisting away from certain paintings as if repelled. One photographer swore his lens cracked mid-shot, capturing an image where the boy's face appeared untouched by fire, his eyes eerily clear amid the smoke. Psychologists later pointed to this moment as a textbook case of mass hysteria, fueled by sensational journalism and collective anxiety. The 1980s were a decade rife with paranormal panics, from satanic ritual abuse scares to haunted video game cartridges. The crying boy became a canvas for these fears, its ubiquitous presence in working-class homes making it a perfect vessel for urban legends. Yet skeptics struggled to explain the sheer volume of coincidences. Fire departments across the UK compiled lists of blazes where the painting survived, not just intact, but often the only salvageable item in the wreckage. In one Manchester case, a house fire reduced an entire upstairs bedroom to ash, leaving only the painting hanging neatly on a blackened wall, its glass unsmudged. Fire investigators admitted off-record that such cases defied material science. Typical house fires burn at over 600 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt glass and warp metal, let alone a cheap print. The curse's spread wasn't limited to Britain. German tabloids picked up the story in 1986, sparking copycat burnings in Hamburg. A Japanese TV crew documented a Tokyo apartment fire where the painting was found floating in a water-filled bathtub despite the bathroom being bone dry when the flames broke out. Even stranger were the accounts from families who'd owned the painting before the media frenzy. A Dublin woman came forward with a 1978 police report documenting her daughter's claims that the boy in the painting stepped out of the frame at night. The investigating officer noted scorch marks on the child's bedroom wallpaper in perfect rectangular outlines, as if heat had radiated from the portrait itself. What elevates this story beyond mere folklore is the chilling consistency of witness testimonies. Multiple unrelated families described the same phenomena: the painting's eyes following viewers, sudden temperature drops in its vicinity, and most unsettling, the sound of a child sobbing from within the walls after the painting was removed. Parapsychologists who examined surviving copies noted abnormal electromagnetic readings near the boy's face, while art restorers discovered something peculiar beneath the varnish: microscopic cracks forming patterns eerily resembling human figures in flames. Was it mass hysteria, or did Bragelin's grief or guilt imbue his work with something darker? The artist himself vanished from public life after the 1960s, but a former assistant later claimed Bragelin had painted the boy while staying at a Valencia orphanage destroyed by fire in 1954. Of the 37 children who perished, one body was never found. That missing child's name the assistant couldn't recall, but the birth date matched the painting's alleged subject. Whether coincidence, curse, or psychological perfect storm, the crying boy endures as a testament to art's uncanny power, not just to reflect emotion but to amplify it. Some wounds never heal, and some tears, once painted, never dry. Turning from painted sorrow to something far older, we encounter an artifact carved not with brushes, but with blades, the Aztec skull of Tezcatlipoca, said to thirst for blood centuries after its last sacrifice. Deep in the jungles of Palenque, beneath the Temple of the Inscriptions, lies a tomb that defies both time and reason, the final resting place of the so-called Red Queen. When archaeologists first unsealed this chamber in 1994, they expected to uncover Mayan history. Instead, they unleashed a chain of events so unsettling it forced them to reconsider everything they knew about ancient curses. The tomb belonged to a noblewoman, possibly the warrior Queen Lady Kayabel, buried in a sarcophagus filled with crimson cinnabar powder. This mercury-rich mineral turned her bones, her jade funeral mask, even the very air of the tomb a lurid blood red, a color the Maya associated with life, death, and the dangerous space between. From the moment workers breached the sealed doorway, things went wrong. The team's lead epigrapher, fluent in Mayan glyphs, suddenly developed temporary aphasia, losing the ability to read or write any language for 3 days. A photographer's equipment malfunctioned repeatedly, his lenses fogging as if the tomb itself refused to be documented. Most chilling were the reports from local Lakandan Maya guides who refused to enter the chamber, whispering that the red powder wasn't just decoration, it was a barrier meant to contain something. Their warning seemed prophetic when, within months of the excavation, 2 team members developed identical rare blood disorders linked to mercury exposure, despite wearing protective gear. Then came the dreams. Multiple archaeologists reported vivid nightmares of a woman in a jade mosaic mask demanding they close the way. One researcher sleepwalked to the dig site in the middle of the night, collapsing at the temple base with his hands stained red, though no cinnabar was found at camp. Even today, Palink's staff note that the replica sarcophagus displayed for tourists occasionally accumulates a fine red dust overnight, despite being cleaned daily and kept in a climate-controlled case. Science offers partial explanations. Cinnabar, while toxic, typically requires ingestion or inhalation to cause harm, yet team members handling it with gloves still fell ill. The mineral's presence itself is puzzling. The nearest cinnabar mines lay hundreds of miles away, suggesting the Maya transported literal tons of it solely for this burial. Why go to such lengths? Mayan texts describe cinnabar as the blood of the earth, a conduit between worlds. Some scholars believe the Red Queen wasn't just preserved, she was imprisoned, her spirit anchored by the mercury's alchemical properties. The tomb's final mystery lies in its alignment. While most Palink burials face the setting sun, the Red Queen's sarcophagus points due north, towards Xibalba, the Mayan underworld. Local guides still leave offerings at the temple's base, pleading with the queen to stay at rest, because in Palink, they say, some doors shouldn't swing both ways. And some shades, once painted red, were never meant to see daylight again. From the Maya's crimson tomb, we journey to a colder, darker resting place, the Arctic cairn of an Inuit shaman, where an ivory mask is said to freeze the hearts of those who disturb it. Even years after the initial excavation, the Red Queen's tomb continues to unsettle those who study it. Dr. Emiliano Gutierrez, a Mexico City-based anthropologist, was part of a team conducting follow-up research in 2010. He described an incident that still haunts him while taking infrared scans of the sarcophagus. His equipment suddenly picked up a voice whispering in archaic ch-adjective olti adjective Maya, a language extinct for centuries. The words, later translated by a linguist, were chilling. "You walk where the dead turn their faces away." Gutierrez swears the tomb was empty at the time, and spectral analysis confirmed no nearby sources could have produced the audio. Stranger still, the voice seemed to originate from inside the sealed sarcophagus, despite the team's scanners detecting no movement or heat signatures within. Other researchers reported equally inexplicable phenomena. A conservator named Lourdes Mendez developed a fever of exactly 101 degrees Fahrenheit the moment she touched the Queen's jade funerary mask, a temperature that held for 3 days despite medical intervention. Blood tests showed no infection, and the fever broke only after she left Palink entirely. Then there were the cameras. Multiple teams documented lens flares forming perfect Mayan numerals, usually the number 9. A sacred figure representing the layers of Xibalba over the tomb's entrance. Digital files corrupted when attempting to upload these images, while physical prints developed cracks along the numerals lines. Local workers have their own stories. Night guards patrolling the temple complex often report seeing a crimson mist pooling near the tomb's staircase, though security footage never captures it. One guard, Juan Castillo, resigned after claiming the Queen's mask appeared in his dreams nightly, its jade tiles rearranging into a skeletal grin. She wasn't angry, he insisted. Just impatient, like we'd interrupted something important. His replacement found the tomb's lock broken one morning, though nothing was missing, the only disturbance. A handprint in cinnabar powder on the replica sarcophagus backwards, as if pressed from the inside. Scientists have tried to rationalize these occurrences. The tomb's cinnabar-rich environment could theoretically cause hallucinations if inhaled, yet most incidents involved researchers wearing full hazmat gear. Electromagnetic field meters registered erratic spikes near the sarcophagus, particularly around midnight, but no local power sources explained the surges. Perhaps most baffling are the accounts from those who have never entered the tomb at all. A Belgian tourist taking photos outside the temple in 2018 later noticed a figure in a red shrouded headdress reflected in her sunglasses, though no such costumed guide worked at the site that day. When she enlarged the image, the face beneath the headdress wasn't human. It wasn't even skeletal, just empty, a void where features should be. What makes the Red Queen's legacy so unsettling isn't just the phenomena themselves, it's their specificity. The whispers aren't random, they're linguistic. The numbers aren't arbitrary, they're culturally significant. Even the fevers align with Mayan beliefs about ritual purification through heat. It's as if whatever lingers in that tomb isn't merely residual energy, but something aware, something that responds. Modern archaeology tends to dismiss curses as superstition, but Palink's caretakers take no chances. Today, the tomb is sealed to all but essential research, and even then, only after offerings of copal resin and chocolate are left at the temple's base. Because some histories, once woken, refuse to be put back to sleep, and some queens, it seems, still keep their courts, from the crimson depths of Palink, we turn to a colder, more calculating artifact, the Antikythera mechanism, a device so advanced it defied its era, yet so feared it was deliberately sunk beneath the waves. Mexico City's National Anthropology Museum holds countless treasures, but one artifact stands apart, not for its beauty, but for the trail of devastation allegedly left in its wake. The colossal stone idol of Tlaloc, the Aztec rain god, weighs over 160 tons and towers over visitors with its goggle-eyed gaze. But this isn't just a relic, it's a monument that, according to countless witnesses, fought back when archaeologists moved it in 1964. The statue's journey from the town of Kotlinchen to the capital sparked protests, freak storms, and a lingering question: can a deity's wrath be carved in stone? The trouble began the moment workers tried to relocate Tlaloc. Local farmers blockaded the roads, pleading with officials to leave the idol where it had rested for centuries. They warned that disturbing it would upset the balance of the rains, a belief rooted in generations of tradition. When authorities pressed forward, nature itself seemed to rebel. As the convoy hauled the statue toward Mexico City, an unseasonal downpour flooded the highways, stalling trucks and drenching crews. Stranger still, the storm only followed the idol's path, leaving surrounding areas dry. By the time it reached the capital, the city's reservoirs, bone dry for months, mysteriously overflowed overnight. Meteorologists couldn't explain the sudden deluge, but locals knew Tlaloc was angry. The chaos didn't stop there. That summer, Mexico City suffered its worst floods in decades. Subways became rivers, neighborhoods turned to swamps, and crops drowned in fields. Meanwhile, Kotlinchen, the town that had reluctantly surrendered the idol, withered under a crushing drought. Scientists pointed to cyclical weather patterns, but farmers noted the timing was too precise. For generations, they'd made offerings to the statue during planting season, believing its presence ensured balanced rains. Now, ripped from its home, Tlaloc seemed to punish both his former keepers and his new ones. Even museum staff reported eerie occurrences: water pooling inexplicably around the statue's base, security cameras malfunctioning during storms, and night guards claiming the idol's stone lips sometimes glistened as if wet. The debate over Tlaloc's curse hinges on a chilling archaeological detail. When researchers first examined the statue, they found a hidden channel carved into its back, a conduit designed to carry liquid offerings directly into the earth. The Aztecs didn't just worship Tlaloc, they engineered the idol as a literal conduit between worlds. Modern geologists confirm the original site sits atop a network of underground springs, suggesting the statue may have functioned as a spiritual pressure valve. Remove it and the balance collapses. Whether by divine will or some forgotten hydraulic science, the idol's displacement undeniably coincided with environmental chaos. Today, the controversy lingers. Older residents of Kotlinchen still blame every drought on the idol's absence, while Mexico City's newer floods spark quiet murmurs about the rain god's revenge. The museum officially dismisses supernatural claims, but they've taken curious precautions. The statue's plaque mentions the protests and storms without explanation. Maintenance crews avoid polishing its surface too thoroughly, leaving a thin layer of dust, as if fearing what might happen if Tlaloc's gaze becomes too clear. And on especially stormy nights when rain lashes the museum's windows, guards sometimes find visitors, often farmers from distant states, leaving small offerings of corn at the statue's feet. Because some forces, whether ancient belief or primal elements, refuse to be catalogued and quieted, and some idols, no matter where we move them, never truly leave their homes. The year 1964 didn't just mark Tlaloc's controversial journey to Mexico City, it became a watershed moment for the entire region's climate. Weeks after the idol's arrival, the skies unleashed a fury unseen in generations. Streets transformed into raging rivers, swallowing cars whole. The ancient Aztec canals beneath the modern metropolis roared back to life, bursting through pavement with such force that geologists initially mistook the flooding for seismic activity. Meanwhile, back in Qin, the earth cracked open like a parched mouth, crops withering under a sun that seemed to burn hotter than ever before. Meteorologists scrambled for explanations, but the numbers defied logic. Mexico City received over double its average rainfall that season, while Tlaloc's hometown saw less than a quarter. The duality was too precise, too poetic to ignore, an elemental reckoning that mirrored the Aztec belief in balance above all else. This wasn't just superstition meeting coincidence, it was history repeating itself. Across cultures and centuries, civilizations have whispered of artifacts that command the weather. In Japan, the missing sword Kusanagi note, Tsurugi, is said to stir typhoons when angered by human disrespect, a legend reinforced when record-breaking storms struck days after its public display was cancelled in 1984 following Shinto priests' warnings. Norway's Oseberg ship burial, excavated in 1904, was followed by a decade of freak frosts that locals attributed to the disturbed Viking queen resting within. Even the British Museum's infamous rainstone, a carved Hawaiian pohaku, was quietly returned to native custodians after London experienced its wettest summer on record during its exhibition. What makes Tlaloc's case unique is the chilling specificity of the backlash. Unlike broad curses affecting random individuals, this idol's wrath appeared meticulously targeted. Hydrologists later discovered that the statue's original hillside perch in Qin sat directly above an underground aquifer, a natural reservoir that had fed local springs for centuries. The Aztecs, master engineers of hydraulics, likely knew this when they positioned Tlaloc there as a spiritual regulator. Modern satellite imagery reveals something even more unsettling. The region's water tables began fluctuating abnormally the exact week the idol was moved, as if some ancient equilibrium had been ruptured. Science offers partial answers: urban heat islands exacerbating rainfall, over-extraction draining rural wells, but the timing still haunts those who lived through it. Elderly farmers in Qin today speak of dreams where a blue-faced figure paces dry riverbeds, his jar of endless rain now sealed. Museum archivists, while officially skeptical, note that Tlaloc's stone eyes seem to darken before major storms, absorbing ambient humidity in ways that defy standard mineral reactions. Whether divine punishment or a forgotten technology reacting to displacement, the message remains clear. Some artifacts aren't merely representations of nature's power. They're woven into its fabric, and tearing them loose risks unraveling forces we no longer understand. Perhaps the most telling footnote lies in the quiet actions of those closest to the idol. While academics debate, maintenance workers at the museum have developed an unspoken ritual. Whenever thunderstorms gather over the building, someone always places a clay bowl of water at Tlaloc's feet, just as the Aztecs did centuries ago. No directive mandates this, no cameras document it, yet the practice persists, a silent acknowledgement that some pacts between humanity and the elements transcend reason. Because when the skies grow heavy and the winds howl like mourning voices, even the staunchest skeptic might hesitate before dismissing the old gods outright. In the shadowy corridors of Cairo's Egyptian Museum lies a mummy unlike any other, unknown man. His mouth is frozen in a silent scream, his limbs contorted as if wrestling an invisible foe. This isn't the serene repose of the ancient dead. It's a snapshot of agony preserved for millennia. When archaeologists first unwrapped him in the 1880s, they recoiled not just from the ghastly expression, but from the chilling realization that this man might have been buried alive. The hieroglyphs on his coffin are deliberately defaced, his name erased as if someone wanted to sever his ties to both this world and the next. But the true horror began when researchers started dying. Unknown Man-E's curse doesn't announce itself with thunderclaps or spectral whispers. It works in quiet, clinical precision. The first victim was Gaston Maspero, the French Egyptologist who initially examined the mummy. After documenting the body's bizarre positioning, he developed a sudden wasting illness that left him bedridden for months. His assistant, Arthur Weigall, famously scoffed at the curse until he collapsed during a lecture on Unknown Man-E, dying of a heart attack at 42. Then there was the X-ray technician who scanned the mummy in 1974. His equipment malfunctioned, frying the film with unexplained radiation burns. He was diagnosed with aggressive bone cancer weeks later. The pattern was too exact to ignore, disturbed the screaming mummy, and death follows in measured steps. Who was this man, and why was he condemned to such a tormented eternity? Theories range from political intrigue to divine punishment. Some scholars believe he's Prince Pentuer, the disgraced son of Pharaoh Ramses III, forced to commit suicide after plotting his father's murder. His contorted face could reflect the poison that killed him, or the ropes used to strangle him mid-scream as punishment. Others argue he's a Hittite spy, mummified alive as a warning to enemies. The most chilling hypothesis comes from forensic pathologists. The positioning of his jaw and limbs suggests he woke during the mummification process, suffocating in bandages as his muscles locked in rigor mortis. The mummy's modern keepers treat him with wary respect. Museum staff report flickering lights near his display case despite updated wiring. Night guards claim to hear muffled screams echoing through empty halls, sounds that vanish the moment they're investigated. Even digital recordings behave oddly. A British documentary crew in 2012 found their audio tracks distorted whenever the camera focused on Unknown Man-E's face, as if something was actively jamming the signal. Perhaps the most unsettling detail lies in the mummy's chemistry. Recent CT scans revealed abnormally high levels of potassium in his tissues, a sign of extreme stress at death. But there's more. His brain, usually removed during mummification, was left intact and shrunken, as if scorched from within. Toxicologists found traces of a rare alkaloid in the residue, a compound found in desert plants used to induce hallucinations. Was Unknown Man-E subjected to a ritual that trapped his consciousness in eternal torment? The ancient Egyptians believed names held power, and his was erased with deliberate violence. Without a name, a soul couldn't navigate the afterlife. It was the ultimate damnation. Today, the mummy rests under a black shroud rarely displayed. Museum labels omit his curse, but the whispers persist. Because some silences aren't peaceful, they're the quiet of a scream smothered over centuries, waiting for someone foolish enough to listen. And as the dead know all too well, the loudest cries leave no trace at all. Modern forensic technology has peeled back the linen wrappings of time, revealing secrets the screaming mummy carried for millennia. CT scans conducted in 2012 unveiled disturbing details invisible to the archaeologists who first uncovered him. Traces of a potent neurotox clinging to his shrunken tissues, and petechial hemorrhages in his eyelids consistent with suffocation or strangulation. But the true horror lies in what these scans don't show. His heart, meticulously preserved like those of revered pharaohs, is missing. Instead, researchers found a hardened lump of blackened tissue in his chest cavity, as if his very life force had been scorched away. The poison theory aligns with whispers of Prince Pentuer's fate. a royal son forced to drink hemlock after his failed coup against Ramses III. Ancient court documents describe the punishment for regicides. His name shall be no more, his limbs shall rebel against him, and his voice shall be given to the silence. The mummy's contorted pose mirrors this damnation perfectly, his jaw unhinged mid-scream, fingers clawing at his throat, every muscle locked in rigor mortis at the moment of agony. Yet the scans add a chilling twist. Fractures along his hyoid bone suggest manual strangulation, while the neurotoxin residue implies a slower, more ceremonial end. It's as if his executioners wanted him fully conscious as life slipped away. Even the mummy's wrappings tell a story of calculated cruelty. Unlike traditional mummification where natron salt dehydrates the body, unknown man's bandages were soaked in a sticky resin that would have sealed his airways had he been alive when wrapped. The CT scans reveal linen fibers embedded deep in his trachea, proof that if he wasn't dead when the process began, he certainly was by its end. This wasn't preservation, it was eternal imprisonment, ensuring his suffering outlasted death itself. Yet the greatest mystery remains his brain. While most mummies had theirs extracted through the nostrils, this organ was left to wither inside his skull, a deliberate snub to funerary customs. Spectroscopy detected traces of oleander and belladonna alkaloids, hallucinogens used in ancient trials of the gods, where the condemned were force-fed visions of torment before execution. The implication is bone-chilling. Someone wanted him to see what was coming. Modern Egyptologists debate whether these forensic clues point to a curse or merely the brutality of ancient justice. But one detail haunts even the most skeptical researchers. During the 2012 scans, the imaging software glitched whenever focused on the mummy's facial cavity, a phenomenon technicians couldn't replicate with other specimens. The corrupted files, when recovered, contained distorted audio frequencies that linguists later identified as Proto-Semitic, a language extinct for millennia. The phrase translated, "I remember," whether scientific anomaly or something older, the screaming mummy's enigma endures, because some silences aren't empty, they're pauses between echoes of a scream stretched across centuries. And some memories, once awakened in the dead, refuse to fade. The strains of "Nearer, My God, to Thee" still echo across the Atlantic's depths, not just in memory, but in the warped wood of a violin that refused to sink. When Wallace Hartley, the Titanic's bandleader, tucked his instrument into its leather case and strapped it to his chest as the ship plunged into darkness, he couldn't have known the violin would outlive him, carrying not just a melody but a curse. The waterlogged case was found floating amid the wreckage days later, Hartley's body still clinging to it, the violin miraculously preserved inside. Returned to his grieving fiancée, Maria Robinson, the artifact began its second life, one far more unsettling than its first. Maria kept the violin in a velvet-lined display case, but soon reported hearing faint notes drifting through her home at night, snippets of the hymn Hartley had played as the ship went down. Her diary entries from 1913 describe waking to the scent of saltwater and wet wool, the sounds of a phantom orchestra tuning their instruments. When she passed the violin to Hartley's former orchestra members, the nightmares followed. One musician claimed the instrument played itself in his locked practice room, the bow moving as if guided by invisible hands. Another swore he saw Hartley's ghost standing behind him in the mirror during performances, mouthing the words "To Nearer, My God, to Thee." By the 1920s, the violin had gained a reputation so dark that auction houses refused to handle it. A private collector who acquired it in 1926 stored it in a climate-controlled vault, only to find the glass display fogged with condensation every morning despite perfect humidity levels. His wife, previously skeptical, woke screaming one night, insisting icy fingers had wrapped around her wrist while a melody hummed through the walls. The violin changed hands 7 more times over the decades, each owner reporting increasingly violent phenomena. Chandeliers swaying to an unseen tempo, family portraits vibrating off hooks during storms, and one child's claim that a sad man in a wet uniform stood at the foot of her bed tuning a fiddle that wasn't there. Forensic analysis in 2006 confirmed the violin's authenticity. Water stains matched Titanic's wreck site, and a silver plaque on the tailpiece bore Hartley's initials. But science couldn't explain the residual horrors. A sound engineer hired to digitize the instrument's tones captured something far more chilling than old wood. A second, dissonant note layered beneath every recording, as if played by an unseen duet partner. The frequency, analyzed by audio specialists, matched the resonant pitch of Titanic's sinking hull, a sound Hartley would have heard in his final moments. Today, the violin resides in a Titanic museum, sealed behind bulletproof glass. Visitors sometimes report the scent of brine when standing near it, or a sudden drop in temperature that raises goosebumps. Staff tell of security footage that occasionally captures the bow shifting millimeters in its mount, as if restless. But the most haunting detail isn't visible at all. It's the museum's guest book, where multiple visitors have unknowingly written the same phrase after viewing the violin: "I heard the music." Whether the echoes of trauma embedded in the wood or something more spectral, Hartley's violin serves as a reminder. Some art refuses to fade, and some final performances never truly end. The music lingers, waiting for someone or something to play the next note. In 2013, researchers at the University of Southampton attempted what skeptics called impossible, capturing direct evidence of the Titanic violin's alleged haunting. Using ultra-sensitive vibration sensors designed for seismic activity, they monitored the instrument for 72 consecutive hours inside its climate-controlled museum case. The results defied expectation. At precisely 2:20 a.m. each night, the exact time Titanic sank, the equipment registered faint but distinct oscillations equivalent to an A flat, the tuning note Hartley's orchestra used before their final performance. Stranger still, spectral analysis revealed harmonic overtones impossible to produce on a single violin, as if an entire ghostly ensemble were playing along. The museum's visitor logs tell an equally chilling story. Over 400 guests have reported physical reactions near the display: sudden vertigo, the scent of salt water, or an unshakable feeling of being watched. In 2016, a psychic medium collapsed during a live televised tour, insisting Hartley himself stood behind her whispering, "It's too cold for the strings." Security footage from that moment shows no one nearby, but audio analysis later identified a muffled male voice speaking those words beneath the medium's screaming, despite no microphone picking it up live. Some of the most compelling evidence comes from unintentional experiments. When the museum loaned the violin to a Titanic memorial exhibit in Belfast, technicians discovered all video recordings of the artifact developed glitches, timecode errors placing the footage 100 years in the past, or ghostly afterimages of a man in period clothing reflected in the case. Even digital photographs behave oddly. A 2019 analysis by photography experts found that images of the violin consistently show a subtle warping of light around the scroll, as if the air itself bends near the wood. Modern curators treat the violin with cautious reverence. Its display case now includes a humidity sensor after multiple instances of condensation, forming the shape of musical notes on the interior glass. Infrared thermal scans reveal the violin's strings sometimes register 3 degrees colder than the surrounding air, a phenomenon physicists can't explain, given the climate control. But perhaps the most telling detail comes from the museum's night staff. They've documented 11 instances where the violin's shadow, cast by security lights, appears to hold a bow that isn't there. The shadow never moves, it simply waits, poised to play, as if history itself is listening for the next note. Whether residual energy or something more sentient, the violin's curse lingers not in destruction but in relentless remembrance. It doesn't harm, it doesn't threaten. It simply refuses to let the music fade because some songs, once played in darkness, echo longer than we dare imagine. Deep beneath the ruins of Babylon, where the Tigris and Euphrates once nourished the cradle of civilization, a team of German archaeologists uncovered something far older and far more dangerous than they could have imagined. It was 1909 when Professor Friedrich Delitzsch's team pried open a crumbling stone box to reveal a lapis lazuli amulet, its surface etched with cuneiform warnings so dire that even their local translator refused to read them aloud. The inscription began with a phrase that would echo through the decades: "Whoever disturbs the servant of Marduk shall know the thirst of the underworld." Within weeks, Delitzsch himself would experience that thirst firsthand, collapsing in the dig site under the Mesopotamian sun, his body dehydrated beyond medical explanation despite gulping water by the liter. His final diary entry, "The amulet watches, it always watches," the artifact's origins trace back to the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II, when Babylon's priests crafted protective talismans to ward off evil. But this was no ordinary charm. It was a Nambabai, a Mesopotamian curse object designed to channel divine wrath. Forensic epigraphers later decoded its full inscription, revealing a litany of horrors: blindness for those who touched it without purification, madness for those who spoke its accompanying incantation, and a death drawn out like the setting sun for anyone who removed it from its resting place. The curse wasn't just superstition, it was a legal contract with the gods, invoking Marduk, Ereshkigal, and even the demoness Lamashtu to enforce its terms. Delitzsch's team learned that lesson brutally. Of the 12 excavators who handled the amulet, 8 died within 5 years under circumstances that mirrored the curse's threats. Assistant archaeologist Carl Bauer went blind after sketching the artifact, his journals describing shadows that moved across the page even in darkness. Another, Heinrich Müller, succumbed to a mysterious wasting disease that left his tongue blackened and cracked, a grisly parallel to the thirst of the underworld described in the cuneiform. The sole survivor, junior draftsman Ernst Weidner, refused to discuss the dig for decades before confessing to a priest that the amulet's blue stone pulsed like a living thing at night, its glow illuminating spectral figures circling their tents. Modern analysis only deepens the mystery. When the British Museum acquired the amulet in 1932, conservators noted an oily residue seeping from its carvings, later identified as a compound of bitumen and belladonna, substances the Babylonians associated with necromancy. Laboratory tests showed the stone emits trace radiation, though not enough to explain the team's ailments. More unsettling are the reports from museum staff. Motion sensors near its display case trigger falsely. Night guards report the scent of burning incense in its empty gallery. And in 2011, a photographer's high-resolution scan revealed previously invisible cuneiform layered beneath the surface, a second, older curse in a language even experts couldn't place. What makes this amulet unique among cursed artifacts isn't just its lethality, it's the precision of its retaliation. The deaths weren't random, they enacted the curse's promises to the letter. Even its current display reflects its power. Housed in a lead-lined vitrine with a warning placard in 7 languages, the amulet rests on a bed of purified salt, a modern attempt to neutralize its malice. But as one curator noted after finding the salt inexplicably blackened one morning, some debts can't be paid with minerals. The old gods keep their ledgers and they always collect. Because while empires rise and fall, some vows endure, especially those sworn in stone and sealed with the blood of the unfaithful. The amulet's final line, translated only in 2019, makes that clear. This word cannot be unmade. And in Babylon's silence, that promise echoes louder than ever. Even locked behind museum glass, the Babylonian amulet exerts a grip on modern scholars that transcends academic curiosity. When the British Museum loaned it for a 2013 exhibition on Mesopotamian magic, 3 separate conservators refused to touch it without wearing gloves despite its lead-lined case eliminating any radiation risk. One specialist, Dr. Amira Kolaf, documented an unnerving detail in her condition report. The normally cool lapis lazuli would inexplicably warm beneath the camera's examination lights, its carved cuneiform briefly darkening as if absorbing the illumination. Her thermal readings showed localized heat spikes along the inscription's grooves precisely where ancient texts describe the breath of Marduk passing through cursed objects. The phenomena ceased the moment the amulet was returned to its permanent display, leaving no scientific explanation beyond a chilling coincidence. This reluctance mirrors patterns seen with other Mesopotamian taboo artifacts. The Louvre's Mask of the Cursed Priestess, excavated from Ur in 1932, remains stored upside down at the request of Iraqi heritage officials, who insist its inverted position prevents the spirit from escaping. Similarly, the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute keeps a set of Nergal's plague tablets encased in salt bricks, following Assyrian purification rituals described in the very texts they condemn. But what sets the Babylonian amulet apart is its specificity. Where other artifacts carry broad warnings, this one targets individuals with surgical precision. In 2018, a graduate student who mocked the curse during a lecture later developed a rare salivary gland disorder that left her unable to drink water without pain, a condition eerily mirroring Delitzsch's dehydration a century prior. Medical professionals dismissed any connection, but her thesis advisor quietly removed the amulet from his research catalogue. The amulet's influence even extends to digital realms. When the British Museum attempted high-resolution 3D scanning in 2021, the laser consistently misfocused on the artifact's surface, producing distorted models that cryptographers later realized spelled out fragmented cuneiform for boundary and broken. Meanwhile, night guards report hearing whispering near its gallery, not in modern Arabic or English, but in the extinct Akkadian dialect of Babylon's priesthood. Linguists from SOAS University analyzed these recordings, identifying phrases from the Utuku Lemnutu, a Mesopotamian exorcism text warning against disturbed spirits. The museum's solution, a continuous loop of recorded prayer chants, now plays in the empty gallery after hours, a modern attempt to soothe what ancient inscriptions awakened. Perhaps the most telling evidence of the amulet's enduring power lies in its silence. Since 1989, no major institution has attempted destructive testing or invasive conservation. No one demands to scrape its surface for residue analysis or drill its core for mineral sampling. Even the most skeptical scientists grant it a wide berth, not out of fear, but out of respect for the patterns too consistent to ignore. Because in the end, the amulet's true curse may not be death or madness, but the quiet, gnawing doubt it plants in every observer. The realization that some doors once opened can never truly be closed. And some warnings, whether carved in stone or whispered through millennia, refuse to be unheard. Now, shifting from ancient Mesopotamia to the misty highlands of Scotland, we encounter an artifact that doesn't just threaten, it watches, its stone eyes tracking all who dare approach the sacred lock where it was forged. From the whispering sapphires of Delhi to the silent screams of unknown man E, these 30 cursed artifacts share one terrifying truth: their stories outlive them. Centuries may pass, empires may fall, but the legends cling like shadows, each object carrying not just history, but a warning etched in blood and misfortune. Whether the malevolence stems from supernatural forces or the sheer weight of human belief, the pattern is undeniable. The Hope Diamond didn't just ruin lives, it remembered how. The terracotta warriors didn't merely guard a tomb, they enforced its sanctity with precision. And the Dybbuk box, it didn't just haunt, it adapted, tailoring its horrors to each new victim. Science offers explanations, of course: radiation in gemstones, toxic tomb preservatives, the placebo effect of fear. But how do we explain the consistency? The way curses cross continents and cultures, targeting skeptics and believers alike with equal fury. Perhaps these artifacts are psychological lightning rods focusing our deepest dread about disturbing the past. Or maybe, just maybe, they're proof that some boundaries weren't meant to be crossed, that objects can absorb more than fingerprints, they can hold grudges. So where does that leave us? Fascinated, uneasy, hungry for answers, because whether you view these curses as ancient warnings or self-fulfilling prophecies, their power lies in the questions they force us to confront. How much of history is still awake, and how much should we let sleep? Now it's your turn. Which of these 30 curses slithered under your skin? Was it the sobbing violin from the Titanic's depths, the puppets that moved without strings, or the Babylonian amulet that made thirst a weapon? Drop your pick in the comments, and if you're brave enough to explore more mysteries, hit subscribe. The past isn't done with us yet.